Welcome to another edition of the Left Hand Path. Here we discuss issues and topics relating to metaphysics, astrology, and astrotheology. The word sinister comes from the Latin for left hand. With a basic understanding of Kabbalah and astrological principles, we can shed light on the occult forces underpinning the globalization project, exposing its sinister progression towards the left-hand path. According to official history, Judaism is the oldest monotheistic religion in the world, dating back some 4,000 years. Today, there are only 14 million Jews, around 0.2% of the world's population. Most of these Jews live in either Israel or the United States. Traditionally, a person would only consider themselves a Jew if their mother was Jewish. However, in some circles it is acceptable to become Jewish by publicly declaring oneself as such, together with adopting the Jewish faith and many of their religious practices. In some stricter circles, a formal conversion is required, under the guidance and supervision of a respected rabbi. Jews believe in the one God Yahweh, who first revealed himself to the prophet Abraham, establishing a covenant with Abraham and all his descendants. This agreement led to the Jews believing that they were God's chosen people, who were promised the land of Canaan, where one day they would build a great nation. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." Genesis 12:1-2. Most Jews do not consider Jesus to be the Messiah. However, they do recognize him as a significant figure with prophetic abilities. The Jews are still waiting for their Messiah to appear, and believe he will come sometime in the near future to unite and rule over all Jews in the kingdom of Israel, after which there will be peace on earth. Another significant figure in the Judaic tradition is Moses. Also a prophet, he was asked by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, from where many were being used as slaves by the Egyptians. Fulfilling God's wishes, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, parting the Red Sea in the process, allowing all of his followers to cross over towards the promised land. On the way, he stopped at Mount Sinai, where he was given a new set of rules by God in the form of 10 commandments. When the Israelites finally reached Canaan, they developed communities which, around 1000 BC, eventually led to the kingdom of Israel, ruled by 3 consecutive kings, Saul, David, and Solomon. The first Jewish temple was built during the rule of King Solomon, a magnificent temple which became the focal point for Jewish worship. Around the year 931 BC, the kingdom was divided and split, with Israel in the north and Judah to the south, a division which made them more vulnerable to outside aggression. In 722 BC, the Assyrians invaded the north and destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Judah continued until 568 BC, a date which saw the Jews overrun by the Babylonians, who in the attack destroyed the Temple of Solomon and sent most of the Jews into exile. In 539 BC, Cyrus the Great, the king of Persia, attacked and took over Babylon. As a result, the Jews were freed from exile and returned to Jerusalem to build the Second Temple. This stood for over 400 years until the Romans arrived in 70 AD to quash a rebellion. They sacked the city and smashed the temple into a pile of rubble. With the temple gone, the focal point for Jewish religious expression was no longer available. Consequently, the Jews turned to various synagogues as a way of keeping their faith alive. Around the year 200 AD, Jewish scholars compiled Jewish oral law into text form. They called this the Mishnah. This was followed a century later by the Talmud, another book on Jewish law together with Jewish theology. It served many early Jewish communities as a guide for the running of their day-to-day lives. The Jews also have the Torah, which is a term used to describe the first 5 books of the Old Testament, which they believe was written by Moses. All these books are used to encompass the totality of Jewish teachings. Whether biblical texts or rabbinic writings, they express Jewish morals, Jewish religious obligations, along with their civil laws. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write down these words, for in accordance with these words I have made a covenant with you and with Israel." Moses was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights, without eating bread or drinking water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. Genesis 34, 27, 28. If we analyze the passing of the ages from an astrological perspective, the names given to many biblical characters have greater significance when the ruling planets of those ages are taken into consideration. During the age of Aries, the Ram, we see many characters at that time with names referring to rams. This epoch was ruled by the planet Mars, which also appears in various significant names. Abraham, Abram, born at the beginning of the age of Aries, approximately 2000 BC. Moses, or Mars, the planet of proactive energy and movement in a specific direction. Moses led the Israelites in a display of proactive movement in a specific direction, across the Red Sea towards the Promised Land. Ramesses, pharaohs Ramesses I to Ramesses XI throughout the New Kingdom period. Tutmosis or Tutmosis, Tutmosis I to Tutmosis IV at the beginning of the New Kingdom. Judaism, being a religion which promotes Saturn's energetic characteristics above all the other planets, leads to unique and specific characteristics being expressed throughout Jewish culture and day-to-day lives. Saturn is the slowest moving of all the visible planets, and as such is synonymous with time. It is Kronos, old Father Time and the teacher. Consequently, it is no surprise to see as a reflection of these energies Judaism being the oldest monotheistic religion which places great emphasis on tradition, scholarship, self-discipline, hard work and career, all characteristics of Saturn. Although Saturn's personified characters throughout history have conjured up some dark, sinister and frightening images, Saturn's energies are not all bad. By aligning one's cultural identity with Saturn, it will in time manifest benefits of a material nature, promoting those under its influence into positions of control within organized structures of authority. Because Saturn is the cross of materialism over the crescent of spirituality, it promotes all things of a material nature in favor of those of spirituality. This is why some old school Christians consider the Judaic God of the Old Testament to be the demiurge, the god of the material realm. The zodiac, as a diagrammatic expression of our conscious connection to the universe, offers insights of a profound nature. Consequently, when we analyze the zodiac signs and houses under the domain of Saturn, we find metaphysical correlations between astrology and Judaism. Saturn rules two houses of the zodiac: Aquarius, I know, and Capricorn, I use. Both intelligence and usury are synonymous with Jewish culture and history. The 10th house is concerned with public persona, social reputation, career path, and substantial achievements. It is sometimes called the house of world leaders, as it shows us how we fulfill our lifetime's destiny from hard work and perseverance. It is the house of family tradition, legacy, roots and ancestry. It is a cardinal earth sign which promotes proactive initiation of material matters relating to career, business, and our social interaction on the world stage. Consequently, because it is the house of career and hard work, although Jews are only 2 to 3% of the American population, they make up almost half of the country's billionaires. With the motto for Capricorn being I use, usury comes into the picture, the most powerful of all forms of control, dominated by offshoots of the Jewish establishment. Aligned with the energetic characteristics of Saturn, through the practice of traditional Judaism, some Jews naturally excel in areas of control, restriction, organization, and materialism, culminating throughout the modern practice of fractional reserve banking. When the Piscean age is divided up into another 12 houses of the zodiac, it can be seen that between the years of 1472 and 1742, when Saturn ruled the outer wheel, many prominent Jewish families, like the Rothschilds, excelled in the areas of banking and business. After the Lutheran Protestant movement in the 15th century had rejected the Holy Roman Empire, it subsequently paved the way for the expansion of usury, especially among the aristocracy of Europe and England. Henry VIII, deep in debt, finally allowed usury back into England. Up to this point, both Muslims and Roman Catholics had resisted usury, viewing it as one of the greatest sins. The Jewish goldsmiths had limited markets available because of political and social restrictions placed upon them. However, after the Protestants rejected Catholicism, some Jews and Protestants joined forces against their common enemy. Freemasonry sprung up, incorporating both Jews and Protestants as a secret intellectual army promoting anti-Catholic sentiments underpinned by aspects of Saturn's characteristics. Mammon was to be promoted, materialism over spirituality. The cross was to dominate the crescent in a new joint venture between factions working towards the globalization or the Saturnization of humanity. Throughout this period, Saturn's influence propelled many people to get to work and work hard, within the confines of discipline, responsibility, limitations and restrictions. Saturn Kronos governs time, along with organizations, structure and order. The commercial revolution was underway, with expanding trade routes and empires. The most disciplined and structured organizations began to dominate, spreading their influence across all corners of the known world. Kronos's influence brought forward the mechanical clock. Due to the invention of the escapement mechanism, oscillating timekeeping devices and spring-driven clocks began to appear in the 15th century, flourishing over the next 100 years. The whole concept of the clock changed society, governing the day-to-day lives of the majority of working people, a major tool in commanding the citizens to get to work and to work hard. For commerce to thrive with ease, a fluid mechanism of exchange was necessary. The Judaic Saturnine community were at the spearhead of this business. Their roots as goldsmiths and moneylenders facilitated usury, paving the way for new parasitical banking institutions. The first modern private central banks appeared, like the Bank of England in 1694, an institution created to enable government and industry to borrow large sums of money with ease. This was the new age of Jupiterian Saturnine expansion, joining forces to initiate the Judaic-Christian empire and globalization. The 11th house of Aquarius, I know, is the house of groups, friends, and goals we set ourselves. A house which seeks intellectual security, where collaboration, shared visions, and community find ways to express collective objectives. The detachment and individuality associated with Aquarius is here, helping to see beyond the familiarity of this known reality. The house of Aquarius is where the mind and its goals merge with others, promoting the power of the group, whether that group be a club, network, or a professional association. The Hermit in Tarot represents energies associated with Aquarius. He is the wise hermit, I know, standing on the double wave of Aquarius, holding a lamp which illuminates the left-hand path with a 6-pointed star, a star which represents Saturn, the traditional ruling planet of Aquarius. Just like Christianity and Islam, various forms of offshoots deviated from the basic concept of traditional Judaism. For centuries, traditional Judaism mainly focused on admirable and peaceful qualities associated with Saturn, keeping their social and moral structure together, underpinned by the writings contained within the Torah and the commandments. However, over time, perverted offshoots began to appear, some of which were so extreme and sinister that even the most liberal rabbis rejected them as abominations to the faith. Traditional Orthodox Jews believe that the Jewish exile, which began around 69 AD, was an edict, a decree from God, which scattered the Jews out among the nations. They were not to return en masse to form any kind of sovereign nation until God, with a new decree, allowed them to do so. God also promised that the Jews would have his protection while they lived out among non-Jewish nations. God strictly forbade Jews from returning in large numbers before their time was right. It is believed by non-Zionist Jews that if they forced the redemption too soon and rebelled against God's wishes, all attempts and efforts would ultimately be doomed to failure. It is for this reason why many Orthodox Jews do not support the concept and actions of the Zionist movement. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left, few in number, among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you. Deuteronomy 4:27. The biblical book, Song of Songs, says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles of the deer of the field, not to arouse or awaken the love before it is desired. This oath occurs 3 times in the Song of Songs. The Talmud interprets this metaphorical language to mean as follows. The speaker here is God, and the daughters of Jerusalem are the Jewish people and the nations of the world. During the Jewish exile, which began with the destruction of the temple in the year 69 AD, God placed 3 oaths upon the world, 2 upon the Jewish people and 1 upon the nations. The Jewish people were forsworn not to immigrate as a wall en masse to the Holy Land, and not to rebel against the other nations. The nations were forsworn not to afflict the Jews too much. Tractate Kesubos 111a. Many Orthodox Jews, like Rabbi Yisroel David Wise, hold the opinion that most practicing Jews who are faithful to the Torah do not support the concept and actions of the Zionist movement. They believe Zionism, by its nature of forcing the redemption issue, are antagonistic to the wishes and edicts of Almighty God, and by forcing the resettlement of Jews back to Israel will ultimately bring about their own end through the wrath of God. Zionism is a new movement, a transformation from the religious into a base, materialistic, nationalistic movement, to have a piece of land which is forbidden for the Jews. Rabbi Yisroel David Wise. One theory which ties Ashkenazi Jews to the Khazars is a theory which has many critics among mainstream academia. It suggests that the Ashkenazi Jews originated from the medieval Khazarian Empire, giving them a different genealogy to the Semitic Jews altogether. Although this theory has been widely attacked, it is still considered credible by some circles. During the 8th century AD, King Bulan of the Khazarian Empire had a dilemma. He was surrounded by expanding enemies on all sides, Christians to the west and the north, and Muslims to the south. He concluded that if his people converted to Christianity, they would be targeted by the Muslims from the south. Conversely, if they converted to Islam, he would be attacked by the Christians from the north and west. Eager to stay in power and continue being a significant trading hub, he decided the best option would be to convert en masse to Judaism. This would allow the king to stay relatively neutral while keeping his kingdom and trading options open. These Jews became known as Ashkenazi Jews and seen as a different subrace to the Semitic Jews of Canaan within the Middle East. Over the centuries, as the Khazarian Empire crumbled, many Ashkenazi Jews moved west to Eastern Europe, to places like the Ukraine, Poland, and parts of Russia. Although the Ashkenazi Jews had accepted the faith of Judaism and practiced its rituals and ceremonies, they were considered by the Semitic Jews as second-rate and not part of the 12 tribes of Israel. Because of this, throughout most of history, the Semitic Jews would not allow intermarriage between the two groups. However, over the past 150 years, this has become more accepted. The main difference between the Ashkenazi and Semitic Jews, apart from biological lineage, was their attitude towards the Judaic faith. According to the scholar of Jewish history, Muhammad Rafiq, the Semitic Jews centered their faith around the Torah, the Old Testament, using the Talmud as a side commentary, whereas the Ashkenazi Jews centered their faith around the Talmud and Zohar, mystical teachings known as Kabbalah, while pushing the Torah to one side. This created two very different ideologies, especially concerning the Messiah and a return to the land of Israel, while the Semitic Jews had no desire to relocate themselves back to the promised land without God giving them a signal to do so with the arrival of a new Messiah. The Ashkenazi Jews were happy to initiate the return to Israel before the Messiah appeared, believing that a return to Israel would promote his appearance in the process. Between 1534 and 1572, Isaac ben Solomon Luria, known in Jewish circles as Har-Ari the Lion, was developing his own version of Kabbalism. He lived in the small town of Safed in Upper Galilee after the expulsion of the Sephardic Jews from Spain in 1492, a time when a Jewish mystical renaissance was taking hold. Luranic Kabbalism became the new foundation of the Judaic Zohar. During this time, an urgency was felt among many Kabbalistic Jews towards hastening a messianic redemption. Consequently, new rituals were developed with a communal messianic focus. From this new Lurianic Kabbalistic approach to mystical Judaism, some interesting yet sinister ideologies emerged. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. Revelations 13:18. In 1626, Shabbatai Zevi was born into a Jewish family in the city of Smyrna on the east coast of present-day Turkey. As a student, he was fascinated with mysticism and Kabbalah. It was rumored that the followers of Lurianic Kabbalism could communicate with God and his angels, predict the future, and perform magic and miracles. From his fascination with mysticism, he became a well-known ordained rabbi and Lurianic Kabbalist throughout the Ottoman Empire. In 1648, at the age of 22, Shabbatai Zevi, riding on an international wave of messianic anticipation, suggested to his small group of followers that he was the long-awaited Messiah. To prove himself, he would pronounce the biblical name of God, a practice prohibited to all except the most high priests. He also told his followers that he could fly, but would not do so in public to people unworthy of his display of magic. On top of this, he claimed that he had regular visions of God, confirming his messianic claim. Because he was only 22 at the time, older rabbis did not take him seriously and saw him as a mischievous upstart. A few years later, now in his early 30s, he was banished from Smyrna for his outrageous claims, only to appear in Constantinople in 1658. It was around this time Shabbatai Zevi met a preacher named Abraham Yachini, who was believed to have forged a document in ancient characters legitimizing Shabbatai's claim as the new Messiah. I, Abraham, was confined in a cave for 40 years, and I wondered greatly that the time of miracles did not arrive. Then was heard a voice proclaiming, "A son will be born in the Hebrew year 5386, the year 1626 AD, to Mordecai Zevi, and he will be called Shabbatai. He will humble the great dragon. He, the true Messiah, will sit upon my throne." Around 1659, he moved to Salonika. At that time, it was the center of Kabbalistic studies among Jewish scholars. After spending some time putting on mystical events in an effort to increase his following, his antics drew the attention of senior rabbis, who once more banished him from the city. After traveling for a while, he eventually settled in Cairo, staying for approximately 2 years. Here he met Raphael Joseph, a wealthy Jewish tax revenue manager working for the Ottoman Empire. Although extremely wealthy and charitable, Joseph preferred a life of abstinence and fasting. After a short period of time, he became drawn into Sabbatai's messianic claims, and from then on would help support Shabbatai Zevi's projects. After Cairo, Shabbatai went to Jerusalem, where he continued to promote his messianic claims, bolstered by regular episodes of fasting. At this point, he gained prestige among the elders of the city due to his close friendship with Raphael Joseph, who from time to time would help with the heavy tax levies imposed on Jerusalem by the Ottoman government. On a trip to Gaza, Shabbatai Zevi met Nathan Benjamin Levi, an active supporter of Zevi's messianic claims. They became great friends, and eventually Nathan would become Zevi's right-hand man. In 1665, Nathan announced that the messianic age was almost upon them and would peak in the following year. Furthermore, the new Messiah would conquer the world without bloodshed and lead the 10 lost tribes of Israel back to the Holy Land. Although Shabbatai Zevi was respected for his relationship with wealthy backers, his messianic claims began to arouse suspicion among the high levels of rabbis within the city. They told him that Jerusalem was not the city where he should be unveiling his prestige, and threatened him with excommunication. Consequently, he left disappointed and headed back to his hometown of Smyrna. At this point, Nathan suggested Gaza, not Jerusalem, would be a better place to reveal his messianic claim to the world. As a result, Shabbatai Zevi and his followers descended on Gaza. Here in the city of Aleppo, they received a great welcome. By the end of the year, he found himself back in his hometown of Smyrna, where, at the celebrations for the Jewish New Year, he publicly announced himself as the new Messiah. This announcement was followed by trumpet playing and shouts of "Long live the King, our Messiah." It was clear at this stage that he was generating a great deal of interest. Whether he had the credentials or not seemed irrelevant to many of his followers. He was fulfilling their eager anticipation and expectation for the coming year of 1666. It ultimately became a self-fulfilling prophecy, with Zevi and Nathan delivering the goods. 1666 became an important year for the Messianic movement. Zevi became leader of Smyrna, deposing the previous rabbi, placing his own followers in top positions. As the word spread, more and more Jews, eagerly wanting their own Messiah, began to believe in him. Throughout Europe, Sabbatean Jewish centers opened, dedicated to Zevi's messianic cause, eventually attracting around 1 million followers. Zevi's secretary compiled a statement which was to be sent out to all Jews. The first begotten Son of God, Shabbatai Zevi, Messiah and Redeemer of the people of Israel, to all the sons of Israel, peace, since ye have been deemed worthy to behold the great day of the fulfillment of God's word by the prophets. Your lament and sorrow must be changed into joy, and your fasting into merriment, for ye shall weep no more. Rejoice with song and melody, and change the day formerly spent in sadness and sorrow into a day of jubilee, because I have appeared. Sometime in early 1666, Zevi left on a trip to Constantinople. Believing in his own propaganda and importance, he was under the illusion that the Sultan of Constantinople would welcome him with open arms. However, when he arrived, the Sultan had already sent out the order for his immediate arrest, which materialized on his arrival in the city. While Zevi languished in prison, his close circle of followers disseminated reports of a contrary nature, spreading rumors out into the Jewish diaspora, telling of how Shabbatai's wonderful and miraculous deeds were being received in Constantinople. Unconcerned at the gravity of his predicament, both Shabbatai and his followers believed, with God's help, their new Messiah would prevail. At this point, especially being an important date within Judaism, many powerful onlookers were becoming increasingly anxious towards its spreading popularity and potential disruption to the established status quo. For this reason, the Sultan gave Shabbatai 3 choices: subject himself to a volley of arrows. If the archers missed, his divinity would be proven, or to be impaled, or to convert to Islam. The very next day, after pondering on his options, Shabbatai Zevi, the self-proclaimed Jewish Messiah, was taken to stand before the Sultan, where he proceeded to take off his Jewish clothes and place a Turkish turban on his head, an act which confirmed his conversion to Islam. Delighted at the spectacle, the Sultan accepted Zevi's conversion and gave him a new name of Muhammad Effendi. Following the conversion, the Sultan was more than happy to inform Shabbatai's followers, together with the greater Jewish diaspora, of the happy news. While both Christians and Muslims fell over each other laughing, throughout Jewish circles it was taken very badly as a tremendously bitter disappointment. However, 300 of Shabbatai Zevi's close followers, along with their families, suspecting that the conversion was insincere, also converted to Islam as a show of allegiance to their Messiah. These Jewish Muslims became known as Donma, converts. They based their community in Salonika, where northern Greece is now, and are still there to this day. After a few years of pretending to be a Muslim, Zevi was discovered singing psalms with fellow Jews. Consequently, he was banished from Constantinople and moved to Dulcigno, a small town where Montenegro is today. Shabbatai Zevi died in 1676 in relative isolation. According to mainstream consensus regarding Jewish history, the story of Shabbatai Zevi ends with his death. However, this perspective is far from the truth. After his downfall and later death, many of his followers, now called Sabbataians, went underground. They formed secret societies and groups which, on the exterior, took on the religion of their host country, while in secret still practicing Lurianic Kabbalism. The Sabbataians essentially went underground, with the knock-on effect leading to some rather dark and sinister cult movements which are still with us today, surprisingly play a formidable role in the modern globalization project. "50 years after the death of Shabbatai Zevi, Jacob Frank was born to a family of Sabbataians in Buchach, East Poland. Purporting to be the reincarnation of both Shabbatai Zevi and Abraham's grandson Jacob, Frank, on the back of the Sabbataian movement, developed an unusual and perverted form of Judaism, which violated many traditional Jewish laws and customs. By the time Frank came on the scene, some Sabbataian sects had deviated into perverted cults, promoting promiscuity and degenerate sexual acts. Wife-swapping orgies became a common occurrence, referred to by the Sabbataian priests as purification through transgression. Although sexual immorality was encouraged, severe self-discipline, which avoided various forms of indulgence, was practiced in other areas of their lives. From this Sabbataian base, Jacob Frank took his new religion to the next level. After proclaiming himself the reincarnation of Shabbatai Zevi and a new Messiah in 1751, Frank moved to Podolia, a city in the southwest part of the Ukraine. Here he began to preach what he had gained from the Donma back in Salonika. After some time, Frank's teachings drew the attention of some senior rabbis, who, after hearing his preaching, found it to be unacceptable and forced him out of the city. Consequently, a congress of rabbis held a rabbinical court in the village of Satanev in the Ukraine. After hearing about sexual promiscuity within the sect under the guise of mystical symbolism, the rabbis concluded that many of Frank's followers and the Sabbataians in general were breaking fundamental Jewish laws on morality and modesty. In 1756, as a result of the hearings, the rabbis proclaimed excommunication against all impenitent heretics, asking all pious Jews to keep a vigilant lookout in order to expose them. This new movement of Jews rejected the traditional Talmud, recognizing only the sacred book of Kabbalah, Zohar. At this point, Jacob Frank publicly announced that he was the true successor of Shabbatai Zevi, and that God had instructed him and his followers to convert to Christianity, whilst all the time concealing their inner identity as Sabbatai Kabbalistic mystics. Most of the Frankists were baptized in the Ukraine town of Lwów. Frank himself was baptized on the 17th of September 1759, and again the very next day witnessed by Augustus III, who acted as his godfather. Records show that by 1790, 26,000 Polish Jews had officially converted to Christianity by being baptized. Although Frank and his followers had publicly converted to Christianity, senior members of the clergy viewed them with suspicion, which on the 6th of February 1760 was proven correct. Frank was caught teaching heresy, which led to his arrest and a 13-year imprisonment. Apart from discouraging and deterring his followers, his incarceration gave him the mystique of a martyr, attracting more followers to the town of Czestochowa. After his release in 1772, Frank continued his movement, travelling to many cities across Eastern Europe, settling in Moravia and finally Offenbach, Germany, where he died in 1791. The legacy of Frankism or Zoharism, apart from claiming to be yet another Jewish Messiah, is one which Orthodox Jews discredit as a perversion of traditional Judaism. It was a sect which was accused of sexual immorality and the revival of canard, Jews using Christian blood for Passover rituals. According to the research of Mohammed Rafiq, both the Sabbateans and Frankist movements were reversals of Judaic principles. Being Messianic movements, they tried to do what was necessary to bring forth the new Messiah. Because the Talmud says the Messiah would appear at a time when everyone is either all good or all bad, as a consequence, these movements concluded that it was far easier to be all bad than all good. Therefore, still fulfilling requirements which would bring about the Messiah, together with a new kingdom and world peace, they believed that by being all bad, they were still doing God's work. R. Johanna said, "When you see a generation ever dwindling, hope for him, the Messiah. As it is written, and the afflicted people thou wilt save." R. Johanna said, "When thou seest a generation overwhelmed by many troubles, as by a river, await him. As it is written, when the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him, which is followed by, and the Redeemer shall come to Zion." R. Johanan also said, "The Son of David will come only in a generation that is either altogether righteous or altogether wicked. In a generation that is altogether righteous, as it is written, thy people also shall be all righteous, they shall inherit the land forever. Or altogether wicked, as it is written, and he saw that there was no man, and wondered that there was no intercessor. And it is elsewhere written, for mine own sake, even for mine own sake, will I do it." Talmud, Sanhedrin 98a. Jacob Frank's Kabbalistic movement taught that the concept of evil is only in the minds of the Gentiles, and that in this world there is no such thing as pure evil. They believed that good comes from the right hand of God, and what the Gentiles consider as evil comes from God's left hand. Consequently, by performing deeds offered by God's left hand, it was still considered as doing God's work. Anyone with this ideology would consider murder, rape, incest, blood drinking, and sexual immorality as perfectly acceptable forms of behavior, believing that if the whole world participated in this form of behavior, they would help to hasten and bring forth the new Messiah. Kabbalists believe that both good and evil exist as expressions of divine energy, being complementary aspects within universal consciousness. Unlike most religions, where evil exists outside of God. Some Kabbalists see evil as an essential part of divinity and the creation, where evil originates at the very core of divine consciousness. The comprehension of good can only be understood through the exploration of evil, just as we appreciate the beauty of the sun far more after we have experienced the rain. Through the promotion of evil, misery and tragedy throughout the world, we should have a better understanding and appreciation of compassion, kindness, and all the good things life has to offer. For the conscious mind to gain a higher and deeper level of understanding, it must explore the subconscious and the underworld, thereby gaining knowledge of those darker aspects of itself. Only when the ego is broken down can the subconscious be allowed in, signaling a deeper and more meaningful spiritual transformation, thereby adding extra dimensions of consciousness through the healing process. Evil derives from the separation of unity. Diabolos divides and abolishes all things united, bringing forth new opportunities out of the chaos created. Through destruction, deconstruction, disintegration, and chaos, humanity has the potential to achieve higher degrees of consciousness derived from its understanding and experience of the evil generated. A sinner who repents is on a higher level than the saint who has never sinned. Jung, Red Book. For Kabbalists to deny evil in the world is to deny God, and through the experience of both good and evil they are able to come closer to God in a reciprocal union of consciousness. By going deep within in an attempt to embrace our dark side, we might come to terms with our baser desires, where the subconscious can evolve to the next level. To be complete, we must include a dark side. Only then do we have the potential to refine ourselves within a divine furnace of subconscious purification. There is no light except that which issues from darkness, and no true good except it proceed from evil. The Zohar, key to Kabbalistic text. From the Kabbalistic point of view, evil brings into the world the possibility of choosing between sin and virtue, which is to say that evil is the very origin of the possibility of the highest good. Freedom of choice is a necessary postulate for responsibility, morality, and the creation of values. Evil becomes the condition for free choice, and hence the condition for the full realization of good. Paul Levy, The Kabbalah's Remarkable Idea. You can't reject evil because evil is the brighter of the light. The evil one is holy. God could not create true freedom for humanity without giving us a choice between good and evil. Carl Jung, Kabbalah. The stirring up of conflict is a Luciferian virtue. In the true sense of the word, conflict engenders fire, the fire of affects and emotions, and like every other fire, it has two aspects, that of combustion and that of creating light. Carl Jung. According to Kabbalists, the greater the impulse for evil, the greater the potential for good. Consequently, with this philosophy in mind. If Kabbalists found their way into positions of power, the world would see a great deal of division being promoted in order to foment evil for what Kabbalists believe to be an improvement of overall human consciousness. Barry Chamish's articles corroborate Reverend Torrell's assertion that the old Marano's families are still with us today, and that Jewish infiltrators are strategically placed in political and religious institutions expressly for the purpose of implementing the Illuminati Judeo-Masonic agenda. Mystery Babylon the Great, Part 3. The Frankists' modus operandi, namely through false conversions and phony renunciations of Judaism, gaining the trust of the ecclesiastical powers which obtained from them the protection of the state to carry out their seditious plans. Rabbi Antelman, Barry Chamish, Mystery Babylon the Great, Part 3. According to the research of Mohammed Rafiq, during the latter part of Frank's life in the 18th century, he had networked his Kabbalistic version of Judaism, which spread throughout the wider community, connecting with wealthy and influential people, including the Rothschild banking dynasty and Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati. According to Rafiq, it was Frank who instructed Weishaupt to set up the Illuminati with the help of Rothschild's money. Frank also instructed a number of followers to go to Poland and set up a variety of factories in order to prosper and make great wealth. In Elias Stern's book, Jewish Materialism, the Intellectual Revolution of the 1870s, he suggests, as a backlash to Jewish conditions within the Pale of Settlements, a group of Russian Jews began to reform Judaism and Jewish ideology towards the material aspect of the universe. Principally, the ideology defined Judaism and Jewish identity within the material aspect of the universe. Jews in Russia during this time began to reform Judaism, looking towards its resources, which could shed light on the fair distribution of wealth. That would become the start of a whole host of Jewish political movements, including Bundism, Zionism, and territorialism. All of these ideologies began with one fundamental idea, that Jewish identity is fundamentally rooted in the physical, material world, times of Israel. In recent years, the spotlight of scrutiny has descended upon the Armenian massacres which took place prior to World War I. It is claimed that it was not the Turks but the Sabbateans who planned and implemented the deportation and mass slaughter of most of the Ottoman Armenian population. Prior to the overthrow of the Caliph, the Donma, based in Salonika, established 3 Masonic lodges in Turkey. Through these networks, they were able to destabilize and overthrow the Caliph, promoting the Young Turks as an antidote to Muslim rule. It was this core group of Donma which organized the secret Young Turks, also known as the Committee of Union and Progress. The secularists who deposed Ottoman Sultan Abdülhamid II in the 1908 revolution proclaimed the post-Ottoman Republic of Turkey after World War I, and who instituted a campaign that stripped Turkey of much of its Islamic identity after the fall of the Ottomans. Historians like Ahmed Refek, who served as an intelligence officer in the Ottoman army, averred that it was the aim of the Young Turks to destroy the Armenians, who were mostly Christians. The Young Turks, under Ataturk's direction, also expelled Greek Christians from Turkish cities and attempted to commit a small-scale genocide of the Assyrians, who were also mainly Christians. Wayne Madison, the Donma, the Middle East's most whispered secret,